do DNA tests continues. You know, everybody, many of our paternity shows, the focus is on the woman who wants to prove to a man that he is the father of her child. But, you know, when we hear the words, "you are not the father," many times, you know, we don't delve into the pain that some of the men are feeling. My next guest, Marcus Matthews, is a man who was falsely accused of paternity as a teenager. And he's written a book and filmed a documentary called "I Am Not the Father." They are... So, the narratives of the book and the documentary are of men falsely accused of paternity. Here's Marcus's story.
When I was 17, I was accused of paternity. A DNA test proved that I was not the father. I know exactly how difficult it can be to deal with a false paternity claim. I Am Not the Father is a book about men who are falsely accused of paternity. The outcry from the book encouraged me to write the documentary and produce it. I Am Not the Father.
I said, "Pop, I had a condom on." He said, "Every time?" I said, "We only had sex once."
Once.
He said, "It didn't bust?" I said, "No, sir." And my dad looked me square in my eye. He said, "That ain't your baby."
I hope that my experience, my book and my documentary encourage men to get tested. I also hope it encourages families to talk about what they're doing with their children and their children's relationship.
You know, I read a New York Times survey a couple of years ago, and it said that 10% of all kids in this country are living with the wrong father. How's that?
That's absolutely amazing.
When you were a teen, what happened?
I was 17 years old, a senior in high school. I met a young lady. She was 16, and we exchanged phone numbers, had a conversation, had sex. She became pregnant, told me that I was her child's father. She had the child, and we got a DNA test. We were waiting on the results, and she died in a car crash before the results were made public. So when I stood before the judge, it was me, the child's grandparents, and the judge told me that I was not a father.
So, in other words, this kind of pain that you went through, was that the inspiration for you to write the book?
Absolutely. I had so many friends.
You had a lot of friends who went through this too?
Yeah, I had friends who went through the same thing. People just, well, it happens so much.
I know. First of all, here's one of the problems with a legitimate DNA test. Now, I'm not saying which are and which are not, but I know ours are. They cost a lot of money. But you want a law that says, we're going to take a DNA test for everybody.
It's important. It's so very important for children to be with and know who their family is.
So when did you decide to make the documentary? When you found out all these other people were like you?
And I also realized that there were so many cases. I was doing TV at home, and I kept getting people on the streets were coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I saw you. You know, I got to be in your next book. I just found out my 16-year-old daughter isn't mine. I've been paying child support 8 years for a kid that's not mine." And, you know, I said, well, instead of writing another book, which I still may do, we'll go ahead and be more dimensional and get the faces and the emotion, because this is an area that's totally untapped. No one has ever talked to a man who's been lied to, who was attached to a child, who was attached to a family. And the effects of it are a lot deeper than people think. You know, I became so distrustful in my future relationships because, you know, that's a lie that it's not just a one-time lie. It's something, and often cases it's dramatic because somebody is crying and they're begging you and they're saying, "Why don't you believe me? I'm hurt," and, you know, for months.
But
sometimes
what you're asking for in terms of the women, you're asking women to say, hey, if there is a doubt, you got to tell me there's a doubt. And we
Absolutely.
have to do a test.
Absolutely.
Marcus Matthews, everybody. Thank you very much, Marcus.